Hello everyone, welcome to the next lecture of Let's Talk UPSC on the free sociology series. So here we will basically start with the thinkers, the sociological thinkers. And the first thinker that we are going to do is Emile Durkheim, right? So we are going to basically analyze the different theories brought in by Emile Durkheim. And we will basically, as you can see on the screen, this is the basic agenda that we will study Emile Durkheim and sorry, we'll be studying Emile Durkheim. So we'll be studying functionalism, the religion and society, division of labor, social facts, and suicide. So these are the different concepts we are going to study under Emile Durkheim, right? Right. So firstly, even before actually starting Emile Durkheim, the main thing that we have to focus on is this aspect called what is functionalism, right? So, and why is this functionalism important? Is because there are several scholars who belong to the school of functionalism, and the functionalism as such is a very important concept, right? So, in sociology, if you see, there are two schools, positivism and non-positivism is over. But if you see in the way sociological study is done, there are two schools, right? The first one is functionalism, and then you have the Marxist notions, right? So these both are like, this is called the functional theory, and this is also called as the conflict theory, right? The conflict perspective, right? So these two theories are very important in as much as like there are a lot of questions asked about the differences in these two aspects and the different aspects of these two schools of sociology, right? So Emile Durkheim was a functionalist. He was a French, a short introduction. He was a French sociologist. He established the first department of sociology, and he basically was a functionalist, right? So now let us look into what exactly is this functionalism, right? So functionalism is that school of thought, or the basic premise of functionalism um, rests on this very particular aspect that there are certain institutions in the society. There are certain institutions in the society, and every institution has a particular function. Okay, and the function is nothing but the positive contribution of that particular institution, right? So that is exactly what functionalism deals with. So to simplify this, let us take the example from a daily example that we all basically know. So okay, human body, for example, right? Let us consider this to be a hypothetical human. And if you see this human, he has a head, eyes, and he must be having a heart, lungs, right? Kidneys, etc., etc. Right? So all of these are different parts, right? Different parts of the body. One part, second part, third part, fourth part, fifth part, and they all have different functions. Like eyes are for seeing, nose is for smelling things and breathing, respiration, heart for pumping blood, which is a very important function again. Liver, there's a separate function, and then kidneys, there's a separate function. So all of them have separate functions, and the entire human body will not function even if one of the part has been spoiled, right? So all of them basically combine to form a one particular body or a one particular organism, right? So that is what functionalists also basically argue, right? So the functionalists basically, the basic premise is that every institution has a positive contribution to the society in a whole, and that positive contribution is called the function, right? This is the basic theory, right? For to explain it in a further easy language, let us take what are exactly these social institutions, right? So I have been telling from the start that functionalism basically tells that the society is consists of several social institutions, and each social institution has its own function, right? So now let us see like what are the social institutions and what are the functions, what are the separate functions that they perform in sociology, right? So social institutions can be many, and the first social institution for many of us is the family. We have the school, we have marriage as a very important social institution. Then we have the political system. Then we have the economy, and there are many else. Okay, I'm not going to write everything, but there are many else, right? So what are the functions that they perform? The positive contributions, right? So remember, the functionalists only talk about the positive things. They're very very optimistic. Okay, let's just remember that way, right? So the very very optimistic, they only talk about the positive things, whereas your conflict perspectives or the Marxists basically talk about the negatives. They are very pessimistic, right? So they basically criticize everything, they bring out the contradictions in everything, whereas the functionalists bring out the good things in everything, the positive contributions to the society, and they bring out the negative contributions of the society. That is the basic difference between the functionalists and the conflict theories or the Marxists, right? So Karl Marx is a leader here, whereas here you can see that there is Durkheim, there is Comte, and all these early sociologists. Basically, there were a lot of functionalists, right? So let's come back. So here, the social institutions basically, as functionalists say, they perform many functions, right? So the family, for example, is functions, or basically gives this function that it maintains the family as a single unit, right? It brings in harmony, right? School, socialization, you tend to meet a lot of people. But however, this is a secondary socialization. The first socialization happens in the family itself. Like when you're born, socialization, we'll study what is socialization when we're doing the next part. But for now, remember that the primary socialization happens from the family, whereas the secondary socialization happens from the school, right? Marriage, what does marriage does? It does this very important reproductive function, right? Reproductive function, procreation, you know um, even for the human race to move forward, marriage was considered to be necessary. I won't say like it is right now very important, but the sociologists, the early sociologists, especially the functionalists, label marriage to be the most important giver of this reproductive function or the procreative function. Right? Then you have the political system through which the polity of the society is maintained. Then you have the economy where there is a division of labor, and because of the division of labor, there is this interdependence, and hence people are able to live in harmony. Right? So this is how the functionalists basically organize a society. So the main premise is that society is made up of certain social institutions, all of which have their own functions, and they function in such a way to promote the society as a whole. Right. So this is the basic premise. Now let us look at the other basic premise of sociology, of functionalist sociology. Right. So the second basic premise is that there is value consensus in the society. So this is the second point. Okay, value consensus in the society, and due to this value consensus in the society, there are shared norms and values in the society. Don't worry, because of these terms I'll explain each and everything in detail. There are shared norms and values in the society. Because of this, there is stability and order due to harmony and cooperation. So these are certain words that you have to necessarily remember to score well or to write good answers, right? So let us now dwell deep into what exactly does this premise of functionalists mean. So the functionalists say that the society is basically made up of value consensus, right? So every person is not according to his own, right? Every person has certain values or norms that are already there even before he came into being, values or norms, right? So these are the shared values or norms. For example, let us say today a person called A is born, right? And he has a family, And let us consider for the example that family is a Brahmin family, Brahmin vegetarian, you know family like that, and they have certain norms like they should eat only veg food, and they should sit on the floor and eat. So these are the different norms that run in the family from generations together. So when A is born, he is just born as a baby, but all these come and influence him, right? So he becomes a Brahmin without he doesn't decide that he has to be a Brahmin or a Shudra or a Vaishya or a Kshatriya. He doesn't decide whether he has to become a vegetarian or not. He is born vegetarian because his family decides it for him, and he is told that you have to eat only vegetarian food, and you have to sit on the floor and eat. And maybe he's also told that whenever you walk in the house, you shouldn't wear chappals. Okay, you shouldn't wear your chappals or sandals whenever you walk in the house. So this is also maybe something that he is told. So all these, does A have a control on all of these? No. So basically there is a value consensus, that is that there are shared norms and values in the society which the society imposes on you through the institutions like family, right? So in that way your socialization is done, right? So how are these norms and values imposed? They are done by two very important mechanisms called socialization, and the second one is called the social control, right? So what are these two? Socialization basically means that whenever you're born, okay, your family basically teaches you a lot of different values as soon as you're born, right? For example, in this case, A was born a Brahmin, and he basically is taught a lot of things like you should be a vegetarian, you should be sitting on the floor and having food, you should not be wearing chappal, etc., etc. So all this basically means that whenever um, a person is born, he's socialized by his family, right? The second socialization comes when you go to the school, right? In the school you're taught that you have to you're taught that you have to be disciplined, you have to be gelling with other students around you. All this is a process of socialization, the initial way in which you're taught how to do things, and you're taught how to basically uh, be doing everything else, right? So this is what is socialization. Right. The second thing is social control. The social control basically means that whenever you are doing a thing or not doing a thing, for example, let us say that you are Alex, okay, and you go to a school and you are studying very well, and you got the first rank in the class, right? You got the first rank in the class, and then you go to your home and your parents are giving you chocolates, right? They're giving you chocolates, right? So this is a form of positive social control. So by doing this positive social control, what is your family teaching you? Your family is teaching you that every time you get a first rank, every time you study well, you'll be getting chocolates, right? So this is a positive social control. And the second one is negative social control. For example, Alex is taking drugs, or he is marrying someone of his outside caste. Okay, he's doing an intercaste marriage. There are certain things like in case of drugs, your family scolds you, it reprimands you, takes you to institutional structure where there is a proper counseling that is done. In case of intercaste marriages, things go even as far as honor killings, right? Honor killings in the family. All this basically are a form of negative social control, wherein these forms of social control basically say that you shouldn't be following this pattern, right? So this is what is socialization and social control. They together ensure that the value consensus is maintained, and that there are shared norms and values in the society, and these further promote stability and order, which ensures harmony and cooperation between the people, right? So this is the second point. I hope you understood that, right? So now let's go further and let's understand more about what functionalism basically says. I mean, Mostly this is what functionalism basically says. That is a broader premise is this. So now let us understand the criticism of functionalism, right? So since we have done with what exactly functionalism is, let us also look at how it is criticized. So let us look at the criticisms or the critiques of functionalism, right? So the first critique obviously comes from the Marxist scholars or the conflict theories. Conflict theory basically tells functionalism as wrong because it basically tells that functionalism only focuses on the positive aspects and they ignore the negative aspects, right? So that is what is their thing. That, for example, when functionalism talks about caste, it tells that caste is a form of division of labor, etc., etc. But because of the caste, there is a very bad position of the so-called untouchables or the Dalits today, right? So what about the oppression that the caste system has done on the Dalits? That is not which is covered by the functionalists, right? So the second thing is that by telling that there is value consensus in the society already present, the functionalists in a way basically do not prove this value consensus. They just say that this value consensus is present and it is there. That is it. They do not show that why is this value consensus there or in what forms it is there. And by saying so, they are basically adhering to the Brahminical views. Okay, the Brahminical views or the dominant views of the society, right? So, for example, in today's context, if we take the cow killings matter, right? So certain section of the society believe that cow, the certain section of our society worships cow, whereas certain sections also have, I mean, eat or consume cows, right? So now to tell which is right or wrong is, we are basically not deciding that on any law. We are only deciding on the basis of what is the dominant view. We decide that the cow killing is not good because it is the dominant view, and this is because that there is a value consensus in the society, and we basically ignore the second point of view, right? So this is basically ignored. So this is the second criticism, which basically the Marxists only again say that by telling that there is a value consensus, the Brahminical or the dominant views of the society are being portrayed in a very greater form than that of the other minority views, right? So the minority views are somewhere uh, you know redundant in this form of functionalist theory. The third one is that by basically following the dominant ideologies, there is a form of a status quo that is being maintained, right? There's a form of status quo that is being maintained. There's a form of conservative bias that is happening. That is, these people or the functionalists basically want the society to be in exactly the way it is. They do not want any changes. So they are not a supporter of changes, right? Even if they want changes, they want a gradual change. They do not want something sort of revolution or something that completely overturns the system, because they want the system to be prevailing as it is, right? So that is a third point, right? So the fourth one is that they basically um, have this thing called the bias of teleology, right? So teleology basically says that causes and functions are the same, right? So for example, if we take an example over here, um, in the second paper we'll be studying about this phenomenon called social stratification, right? So social stratification, there are very famous sociologists called Kingsley Davis and Wilbert Morse. Okay, so these two basically they say that social stratification in the society, the presence of social stratification in the society itself means that social stratification is functional. So what did we mean by telling something is functional? We meant that by saying something functional means that it is having a positive addition to the society. So these sociologists basically say that The very presence of something means that it is functional. You don't have to prove it to be functional. It is just that if it is there in the society, that means it is doing something to the society, and that is why it is there. So we also have another great sociologist called Malinowski, who basically says that witchcraft, okay, witchcraft, I think people, what is witchcraft, in which, there is a sort of black magic that is performed, or there's a sort of superstitional pujas or magics that are performed. So he tells that the mere reason that witchcraft is existing in the society means that it is functional. See, do you identify the way these people are, right? They basically say that since it is present, it is functional. So because witchcraft is still present, it is functional. They don't bring out the bad things of it. They just say that if something is there, that means it is perfect and it is important for the society. That is what these people argue. The functionalists basically argue, right? So that is another criticism of their theory, right? And the last criticism, I think it is the fifth criticism here. The fifth criticism is that they basically overpower the individual. The individual's power is never concerned. Every time the individual is lesser than that of the society. The society is the one that controls the individual through mechanisms like socialization, and the other one is social control. So basically their premise is this, but this has been proved wrong by many people. For example, Marx, okay, he basically says that the individual is the one who is important, and his ideas are important, and that is how the individual basically becomes a very very great person, and he influences the society as well. We have many other influential individuals like Buddha, we have Gandhi, we have many people, individuals who have changed the entire society, right? So in that way, if you see, the individual power is being undermined by the functionalists, okay? So these are the basic criticisms. So let us just look at the criticisms once again. The first one is that of a Marxist criticism. Then you have the value consensus, wherein they basically belong to the dominant section's views, and they have a conservative bias, and they don't support any changes. Then they are haunted by this teleological phenomena, wherein they consider causes and functions to be the same. And then they also bring in this individual is undermined in functionalism, right? So these are the criticisms of functionalism. Right now we are basically done with functionalism. Now let us move forward and do the other parts of Emile Durkheim, right? So we'll do the other parts of Emile Durkheim. The second part that we have to do here is exactly the religion and society part of Emile Durkheim, right? Religion and society. Okay, very interesting it is, because it has a lot of applications in today's world, and you can actually enjoy while studying this, right? So his book is called The Elementary Forms of Religious Life. Elementary Form of Religious Life. This is his work. This is his book, which Emile Durkheim has written, right? So in this, basically, he talks about what is a religion. Okay, he gives the definition of religion. He says that it's a unified set of beliefs and practices. Right? It's a unified set of beliefs and practices, and it is basically related to two things, that is sacred and profane. Okay, so what is the sacred and what is this profane? That is all his work about religion is, right? So for him, sacred is something that is set apart or forbidden. Example, you know, Om, right? This thing, or the swastik mark. These are all very sacred, right? We don't usually write them anywhere which is not considered to be pure, right? So this sacred is something that is set apart, forbidden, which is very pure, or which is very near to the religion of a person, right? So all this is something that is very sacred. For example, you have the uh, prasad, okay, that is uh, given at the temples, right? It is very sacred to you. You never throw it in the dustbin. Why? Because it is sacred. On the other hand, you have this thing called the profane. Okay, the profane is nothing but which is not sacred, right? For example, the pen, your clothes, all these are not sacred for you. They're just there because they're there because you need them, right? So after this, he gives a list of things about what exactly consists of sacred, right? So what is a sacred thing? Like, he gives a big theory on what is sacred and what all things can be considered sacred, and the characteristics, basically the characteristics of sacred. So he basically says that sacred is something that is set apart, forbidden, and to touch them or to get used to them, you have to use. There are certain rules and regulations, and they are protected and isolated from the real world. Okay, for example, your puja room, it's not there in your everyday room, right? There's a separate room for that where you keep the idols of the god, the photos, etc., etc., right? So that is all protected and isolated. You don't touch it without taking bath or etc., right? And he basically says that it is not based on utility. It's not based on utility, but it is rather based on dignity and power. For example, if you see cow versus donkey, in both of them, which do you think is most useful? Right? Donkey is most useful because it carries a lot of weight. It travels for a long distances, helps the washerman, etc. But when you compare cow and donkey, which is worshipped in our houses, the cow is worshipped, right? The donkey is not worshipped. The cow is sacred. The donkey is the profane. So here you're not looking at the utility, but you're looking at the dignity and the power, right? So that is what is sacred again, right? And then you cannot basically touch them without impunity, right? Sorry, with impunity. So you shouldn't touch without impunity. That is, if you touch them not according to how they are said to be done, then you get punished, right? Then you receive punishment. So that is what is sacred. And he also says that if something is sacred today, it can also become profane, and something that is profane can also become sacred. So there is this passage always happening from sacred to profane, profane to sacred, um, re- depending on the situation and the use of a particular thing, right? So for example, a laddu that is made in the home, okay, laddu that is made in the home is profane, but the same thing that is given in a temple, the same laddu, if it is given in a temple, it becomes sacred, right? So see, depending on the situation, the profaneness and the sacredness of a particular thing also changes, right? So that is what basically Durkheim states, that religion is nothing but the worship or the beliefs and the practices that are associated to this sacred, right? So from where did Durkheim basically bring out his theory of religion? He brought it from this study called Totemism. Okay, in the study, he basically studied the Arunta tribes of Australia. Okay, they are Aboriginal tribes, and they basically worship totems, right? So totems is nothing but these people are all divided into certain clans or groups. Let's say A, B, C, D, E, right? And every clan or a group of the tribe has certain totem that they worship. For example, A may have a neem tree, B may have a lion, C may have a lizard, D may have a flower. So all this, like, there are different things that the people worship, right? And when the clan A is worshipping the neem tree, it means that it is worshipping the society itself again, right? So by this, he basically concludes that you know religion is nothing but the worship of the society by the man. Religion is nothing but the worship of the society by the man. or the individual, right? So this is what he concludes. He says that whenever a person is worshipping a god or anything, he's doing nothing but he's worshipping the society himself, right? However, remember that Durkheim never brings in this idea or thought of the god, right? He basically says that worshipping or following your religion is nothing but worshipping the society in which you're staying, right? So that is what he basically says. So next he also gives the functions of religion, right? So he basically talks about what are the functions of religion. So what are the functions of religion? The first one is that there is a shared morality. What is right, what is wrong is something that is given by the society, by the religion. Then you have this social control. If your religion prohibits you from eating non-veg, you think, you get frightened, if maybe if I eat non-veg, maybe something will happen wrong to me. So that's a social control mechanism, right? And the religion basically proves that the society is greater than the individual, right? And it gives a sort of moral strength to the people as well, right? So these are the functions of religion, right? So in the next part, I will end the audio here or the video here, and we'll do a second part of this in which we'll be doing the next parts, and that is all for this video. Bye.